PWHL.
Well, now we welcome in Laura Rollins, who's joining us from Norway and is a fantastic contributor, writer for the Hockey News, covering a lot of the international scene and the SDHL. Please check her out on the Hockey News and social media as well. There's so much hockey going on that, here in North America, we might lose track of it. And Laura's the person to follow. So, all of her social media and writing is well worth checking out. Welcome in, Laura. It's so nice to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Let's just take a look. We wanted to talk today about the Women's Euro Hockey Tour that just finished up, or the Six Nation portion of it in Finland. You were covering that extensively and got to see all the games. Just first of all, in case folks didn't see it, the games were in Finland and not easily available. But what was this stop of the tour all about, and who took part?
Okay, so I guess the easiest way to explain it for North American fans is that when the PWHL had this international break, the last week or 10 days off, four national teams in Europe organized to compete in a tournament that also included, at this point, two young sort of select teams from Canada and the US. So the teams involved were the Finnish national team, the Finnish senior national team, the Swedes, Czechs, Switzerland, and then the select teams of younger NCAA players from Canada and the US. They completed in a 6-team tournament. So what they did was they had two groups. Each group played two games. So they played a game against everyone else in their group. And then the top four teams went on to the sort of elimination round, semifinals and finals.
Right.
US came away as the big winners on a huge performance by Abbey Murphy. The US were really, I don't want to say completely dominant because the games were quite close. But the US have quite a stacked team.
Yeah.
You saw it yourself. But it was very interesting, especially for European fans, and very important for these European teams to have this opportunity to compete during the season. Historically, what's happened is that European national teams only really compete at World Championships or Olympic qualifying tournaments or at the Olympics. In-season tournaments, often there are players who are away in North America, so they might have kind of their B team or even their C team at international tournaments. This year, the international break featured many, but not all of the top players in Europe.
Yeah. And we know, from this side of the ocean, I don't know if there were last minute decisions, but basically the PWHL kind of pulled the plug on any of the players that are signed in their league to go ahead and take part. I think the Czech players were kind of late subtractions, we'll call it, and so it ended up, I think, was there only one actual, I think Emma Soderberg was the only official PWHL player that took part, which, it was a disappointment. It definitely gave opportunity to other players from those nations. But how do you feel about that? Just, do you have an opinion, and how do you think it affected things in the tournament?
My opinion is that the PWHL is so new and the women's hockey landscape has changed so much in the last 2 years that everyone everywhere is still figuring things out. I think for the most part, there is good faith from the PWHL that they want women's international hockey to be strong. I think that, of course, they support their players being on the national team, but at the same time, I understand that the PWHL season just started. Training camps just ended. Do you want to send your players back over? Do the players want to go over and deal with jet lag, possible injuries when they've just signed a pro contract, et cetera, et cetera? So I believe that in the future, they will find a way to include more PWHL players in these international tournaments. which would be fantastic for everyone because it allows a European fan base to see the very, very top players in the world. But I think that no one's quite ironed out the details yet. It'll take a little bit of time.
Yeah, true enough. Yeah, you can see both sides of it. It would have been really nice to see them, competing with full squads, but yeah, the travel and the risk of injury is certainly a big concern. But the nations, Finland, Sweden, Czechs, uh, managed to do really well. I think the Czechs probably were missing a big chunk that made it maybe the biggest difference in my opinion. I don't know if you feel it the same way, but actually we can start with them because I think they have one of the most interesting players. So maybe if we do that team by team in no order, just because I'm looking at your article in the Hockey News, and I'll go ahead and link to that with the takeaways from the tournament in your point of view. And the number one is a specific player from the Czech squad. Why don't you go ahead and tell us who that is?
Yeah, I'm absolutely fascinated by Kristina Keltonkova. Forward at Colgate, has had absolutely incredible numbers at Colgate every year that she's been there. She's scored over 50 points 3 seasons in a row. Really interesting player also because she hasn't been on the Czech national team for a while, despite these incredible numbers in the NCAA. There's speculation as to why that is. I won't get into it, but the fact that she's back now, I think, is really interesting, especially to see her back with Carla McLeod, hopefully a player's coach, hopefully someone that we can see develop Kelty and really give her an opportunity to play. And what we saw in this tournament was exactly that Kaltenkova was playing on the power play, on the penalty kill, 5-on-5, 6-on-5, taking big face-offs. And she's just a beast, if I can put it simply.
Yeah.
Really electrifying player, intimidating. The look about her is scary. She shoots hard. She skates hard, passes well, good vision. Just a joy of a player to watch. So I'm excited on the international level. I haven't seen her on the Czech national team before. Now seeing her, I'm excited to watch her again.
I'm just looking at your article because I want to watch some more of her. I've tried to keep, there's so much hockey to watch, but she is noticeable. You're right. Like you can't take your eyes off her when she's on the ice. And I love that you wrote, tongues out, fishbowl visor, rolled sleeves, skate laces hanging off her pants. She wears that number 98 that, you can't wear that if you're not confident. And if folks have a chance to watch some NCAA games on the weekend or to go back and watch some of these international games, you'll know when she's on the ice. And we're thinking that if Abby Murphy doesn't declare for this draft, we might be looking at the number one pick here. Do you agree with that? Would she be your top pick other than Murphy?
If she was, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah.
Put it that way. She's a different tier, different level of player. And she's a very mature player is the other thing, that she is very much an adult in an adult body, ready to go. The way she thinks the game, very mature. So I would not be surprised to see her go number one. It's a possibility.
Yeah. Interesting, exciting. So, yeah, the Czech squad, as you said, Carla McLeod went over and I think they had a similar play style, but maybe just not all the personnel. You can probably list the players that were missing. I know there are at least 6 or 7, from Razova, Peshova, Venishova.
I believe there are 9 missing.
9. Okay. So,
yeah.
Yeah. And basically they're almost their strongest, core of players. So what did you make of their games overall? I think maybe the results weren't what they would have hoped, but probably not too surprising.
Not too surprising. Again, I think that the team that they had now, a lot of really good talent, a lot of really good young talent. And I think we saw inexperience, we saw some nerves, we saw I don't want to call them kids because they are women, but they're young women, playing like young women, having, taking on big roles on a national team that perhaps they haven't taken on before. So yeah, I thought the Czechs played in fits and starts pretty well. Um, their young players are very good and will be very good senior players with a little bit more time. It was a
Right.
younger, inexperienced team. They look like it, but the future is bright. I wouldn't be worried about how the Czechs did.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. A, a little bit like, of course, I might be a little biased, but I feel like the American squad was not as hampered by the players that were missing as, the Canadian team. I think they call it their under 23 or their development team. So, and I, I'm not sure if Nicole Gosling was the only member of the who had played a senior national game. Chloe, or no, I don't think Caitlin Kramer has played yet. They've tried out, but a similar kind of big missing core, and so the results are what you would expect. But for Canada, with a great second tier, I'm switching ahead. Maybe we'll switch ahead, but that great second tier can kind of hold its own. So yeah, why don't we just switch on over since I'm hopping around. Thank you for bearing with me, but yeah, Canada, I would call it pretty similar to what you just described for the Czechs. And I know you don't get to follow as many of those players because they don't play in Europe generally, but would you say that's the case? Kind of a younger squad that
Yeah,
held
I
its
mean,
own?
I think I'm at a bit of an advantage in the sense that I get to look at a Canadian team like that with kind of fresh eyes. I haven't seen many of them play before. I've read the names, of course. I've seen them a little bit at the U18 World Championships. But again, with the Canadians, what you see incredible skill, you see good game sense, but also making the kind of mistakes that young players make. How is Abbey Murphy, the top scorer in the tournament, totally alone in front of the net? Right? A simple mistake to make, but one that perhaps older, more experienced players wouldn't have made at that time.
Right.
That being said, I think it's really important for the Canadian youngsters to make these mistakes now. What do you learn from? You're going to remember those mistakes, build on them, come back stronger later. So again, I think this tournament was interesting. Canada sent a B team or a U23 team or whatever you want to call it, a young team. But I think we'll see and hear a lot from a lot of those players in the future with the senior women's national team.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think, the gold medal game and all the way through, I think, the games were really close, which was a little surprising. Maybe before we jump to the Americans, I want to give a shout out to Yves Gascon, the goaltender for Canada, who I think I'm not sure if they named an all-star team or best goaltender. Maybe you know about that, but I was really impressed with her. Of course, she held them in and allowed them to make some mistakes and then go ahead and get those goals. Did you notice that as well? I mean, I don't know if you're as familiar with her.
For sure. And I mean, she's been a lot of fun to watch for years, and there was hype around her when she was playing boys hockey, of course, doing well in college. And she showed that the hype is kind of deserved, I think. Like you said, kept them in game, especially in the gold medal game. I think she kept them alive long enough to have that comeback.
Yep.
So yeah, full props to her. A lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, for sure. And Nicole Gosling showed well and just that's just more experience for her taking on an even bigger role, as kind of a senior member of a younger team. But it's all just great experience. And, maybe that's a thread we revisit as we chat about all of these teams. Like these are important games. They're not something that players just brush aside or say, oh, this is just a break in the calendar. This is a chance to put on your national jersey and represent your country with real meaningful results. So yeah, I
Absolutely. And
was,
I think, sorry, but I think it's interesting when such young players meet each other. It's same thing on the boys' side in the World Juniors because bigger mistakes are made, because there is electrifying talent without experience. So crazy things happen. I think that's why it's actually really fun to watch a U23 team or these college kind of all-star teams, because crazy things happen.
Mhm.
Like I watching that game, I didn't think Canada was going to come back, and then suddenly the score's tied. How did
Mhm.
that happen?
Mhm.
Okay. Just a lot of fun hockey to watch, and I think it's important to remember sometimes that it is just really fun. Like we can write stories about it and we can, agonize over who's going to get drafted and all that. But in the end, sometimes you have to sit back and be a fan a little bit and just enjoy it. And I thought the tournament was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah, well said. Yeah, that game was it was just it reminds me of the men's or the young men's World Juniors as well, where sometimes games just go from wow, like upside down, 5-0 to like a 6-5 overtime win or something. And those are just that's what makes hockey fun when it's unpredictable. You definitely don't want to see just a powerhouse take on a team that can't keep up with them. So that was
Exactly.
really interesting. But yeah, speaking, I won't use the word powerhouse, but there was a disparity, and to the credit of USA Hockey to some degree, because they've used a lot of these younger players on the senior national team already, the NCAA stars, mostly from Murphy to Layla Edwards, Carolyn Harvey, on and on. And it showed, I think it was fairly obvious that they were familiar with each other from the experience, and, they rightly won the tournament, I suppose is how you'd say it. What were your highlights from their outing?
Again, like a lot of those American players, I only really know from reputation or from highlights. I think seeing like Layla Edwards reminds me, not in playing style necessarily, but just in the presence of like Carolyn Ouellette back in the day. A big, powerful, good, hard first pass D. So I don't know. To me, the future is bright. It's really exciting for me from the other side of the pond to meet all of these new players that I don't have the opportunity to see as much as you guys do. But also for me to see how the European players stand up or match up against these, NCAA talents. And I think in my mind, Sweden probably did the best in terms of outdoing expectations in this tournament. I think they showed that they're back, hopefully, in the top five of the world. If they can maintain the same level that they have, and if they can continue to develop these young talents that they have coming up. I think a lot of people were not expecting Sweden to do as well in this tournament as they did.
Hi, here's that awkward break in a podcast, where usually there'll be some kind of message that I'll read about a betting site or a product that somehow has very little to do with the actual content. But guess what? This podcast is brought to you by you. If you're looking on the screen, you can see our PayPal address is simply GameDay Hockey spelled out the number 1 at gmail.com. As much as you want, as regularly or not as you want. We're not brought to you by anybody. We're not sponsored. We're not promoted. We're not restricted by anybody. For today, it's just simply send us $1 or $2 on PayPal. And if you're listening on Spotify, there's a way to support us on there as well with a regular or a one-time donation. So again, this podcast is brought to you by you, and that's the end of the break. Yeah, playing those big minutes in the SDHL, we've seen players come from that, that are I guess we're getting a little bit better look at how the comparison or how the transition. We'll know more in a few weeks as more of these players, the top level. I'm thinking of the Savalainen and Toulouse and players like that. We'll see, exactly how big of an impact they're going to have. But are you able to not quantify, but kind of measure that in your mind when you see the players make the switch over here, whether it was last year or even the 3 whole games that have been played this year?
Yeah, I think the question from Europe still is and has been, how well do the stars of the SDHL or the stars of the Swiss League actually translate to the PW? Can they come immediately from the SDHL and produce, contribute at the PWHL level? I think we're seeing that some of them can, that it's very much possible for an adult, you know, fully developed, ready to go player to show up in the PWHL and perform. Does that mean that every single player that comes over from Europe is immediately going to be at the same level that she was in Sweden? Of course not. People develop at different speeds, but I think what we're seeing is that, especially I think because Sweden has been allowing body checking for 2 years, 3 years, that at least from the physical contact side, the players are not struggling with that when they get to North America. Everybody's bigger, everybody's faster, everybody's strong, but they're used to getting and taking hits. And I think that makes a big difference to the gameplay, especially the aspect of just having your head up and expecting someone to come and rock you a little bit. You got to get your head up, move the puck quickly. So they're accustomed to that, and because they're accustomed to that, they're able to make, I think, the jump over. I also have to say that I think the PWHL GMs generally have evaluated players well enough that they're choosing the ones who are ready to go over. So that's my evaluation so far, but it's early days, eh?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, that I really appreciate you pointing that out. I think it's been mentioned here and there, but a lot has been written about the NCAA players trying to get used to the hitting, and it's a big transition. It's not a small thing. As you said, it's not even necessarily the hitting, it's the awareness that it's there. And when you go for a 50-50 puck battle, or when you kind of have someone in the corner of your eye, there's just a different, quality to what you're anticipating. And I think it's noticeable that the SDHL players have that already. I mean, my friend of the show, I guess, Nora Toulouse, who is not the biggest player, I have seen her throw some hits and it looks like she's enjoying it. I mean, she's just equipped, she said she's not looking for that. And, but if it's there, she knows what to do. And she's also more adept at protecting herself and using her own angles and skating ability to sidestep bigger players like Ronja Savalainen, who apparently is going to try to give her a little bump, is what she said. I can't wait for those two to meet. And Savalainen, I think, is already enjoying the heck out of it. She's thrown some big hits too. So, but since we're talking about a couple of Finnish players, why don't we take that transition and talk about how Finland did in this tournament? And they were missing several players, maybe not as well, the bigger names for sure. It makes a difference when you take them away, but they did have great goaltending, and I think overall got a pretty positive showing.
they did. I mean, if a lot of, like you said earlier, the broadcasts were mainly in Finnish, at least the ones that were available through sideways connections to those of us who are interested. But the Finnish announcers were commenting a lot that they felt that the coaching was very conservative, meaning in their opinion that the coach wasn't necessarily using the offensive tools that he had at his disposal to actually try to attack. That's been a criticism of the Finnish national team for quite a few years, that in fact they go into a defensive shell and don't actually try to score enough. Previously, that was a criticism of the men's teams in Finland too, that was sort of choke up the slot, hope to block shots, hope to get a goal in transition. So I kind of agree with the announcers or the commentators that were saying that. Finland has a lot of offensive talent, even missing the players from the PWHL. Currently, 4 of the top 5 scorers in Sweden are Finns. They're young, they're explosive, they're deceptive, they have good hands, they can shoot. Like, I kind of like let them cook, like let them go and see what happens. But Finland did all right. They did what we expect them to do. They play in a defensive shell. If they can keep their defensive shell together, block shots, they get some chances in transition, chances 2-on-1, but I think it's not as exciting hockey as it could be. if their offensive players were allowed to play more offense.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, we're thinking of players like Vivi Vainica, who might well be, let's say, a top 6 or 7 pick. She definitely would be in my top 5 or so, but and Holopainen. What can you tell us a little bit about those individuals? Like you just mentioned the good hands and the fact that they're leading the scoring. Can you give us the specifics on who those are and just kind of what style of player you think they are?
Yeah, so Vivi Vainikka plays for Luleå, which is the best team in Sweden right now, top of the standings, have been for a long time. She's been in Luleå for a number of seasons now, I'll say 3 or 4. Previous to that, she played in Finland and tore up the Finnish league. She's a great offensive talent. She has great separation speed, great hands. She's fantastic in the corners. She can change directions on a dime, break ankles, likes to play in the right hand corner, come up out of that corner and then dangle and snipe. She scored a nice goal in this Six Nations. I think it was a one-timer on a 2-on-1. Really talented, electrifying player. Hard worker, back checks as hard as she forechecks, as hard as she attacks. Like you said, I think she's a top 10 player, top 10 draft player for sure. I would like to see her again on the national team, get a little bit more responsibility and a little bit more ability to do what she's good at, which is score and create offense. From there, you also have Elisa Holopainen, who is the #1 goal scorer in the Swedish league right now. You also have Petra Nieminen, who's one of the top 3 goal scorers, or maybe she's the top scorer right now. And then you have Michelle Karvinen, who
Yeah.
was not at the Six Nations tournament, is 33 years old, 34 years old. I believe is still one of the very best hockey players in the world.
Oh my gosh.
Um, I love tuning in to watch her team play for Linda because I love watching her.
Mhm.
She darts in and out of seams, creates space where there isn't any, incredible vision. Like, if she wants to go to the PWHL, someone should take her because she's a difference maker. But I don't know if she really, really wants to go, and I don't know if Frölunda wants to let her go. They're building something great in that club, and she is a huge piece of that. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see if Michelle wants to go. Holopainen played all right in the Six Nations, I think, but to me could use a little bit more maturing, fine tuning, maybe. Unquestionable offensive talent, deceptive, but I think didn't really get a chance to perform in the Six Nations.
Interesting.
Petra Nieminen would love to see in the PWHL, but she signed for another year in Luleå. Physically, probably the most physically ready to be in the PWHL. Big, strong player, kind of power forward type. Um, Fun to see. So the Finns have a ton of talent and a ton of young talent coming up, challenging the talent that they already have. It'll
Mhm.
just be interesting to see if they're unleashed a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I'm going to tuck that away for, watching them in future tournaments as well, because you're right. It's almost been a historical, cultural, style trend for Finnish teams on almost every level. So, but the talent is there that they could open it up so that, yeah, it would be really interesting. And then, I mean, not to mention they have the goaltending. We talked about Canada being able to unleash their offense with the goaltending. And can you tell us from that point of view, those Finnish goaltenders are pretty much on par with what we said about Canada's netminders.
Yeah, so Finland's been, I won't say struggling with net minding because they've had good goaltending for years, but they haven't had the goaltender for a while. Those of us who are a little bit older will remember Nuka Ratu
Of course.
was their go-to goalie for many years, and she was lights out, world class, probably the best goalie in the world. in her day. Now she's the goalie coach at St. Cloud State. And lo and behold, both of Finland's goaltenders in the Six Nations play at St. Cloud.
St. Cloud is like the mini destination for Finnish players. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
It
But
is.
yeah,
But it looks like Sami Ahola has taken over the number one A spot in Finnish goaltending. For a couple of years, their goaltender has been Anni Kaisala. Good goalie, big goalie, struggled last year a little bit, had a pretty rough season in Sweden last year and has now gone back to the Finnish league. She's by no means done. She's still a young player, could come back, but I think Sanni Ahola showed in this tournament what she's capable of. Again, young and made some mistakes that were sort of young mistakes, inexperience. But I think she's shown that she has the talent, she has the patience, her positioning is good, she tracks the puck remarkably well. So I wouldn't be surprised if she becomes Finland's 1A either right away or in the very near future.
yeah, yeah. And um, I was starting to ask you, was there an all tournament team or anything like that, or are we just like
Not that
looking?
I'm aware of. It was kind of interesting because when the tournament ended, it just kind of ended.
Yeah,
Like it was like, hey, you win the gold, done.
yeah,
I guess everyone had to get back to their club teams. But I haven't read anything about it. If there, in fact, is one that I'm not aware of, I hope that somebody makes me aware of it. I'd be happy to write about it.
yeah.
But I
Maybe you
wasn't
can
aware
come
of
up
one.
with your own. You can name your first and second all-star teams. I think Ahola would be the top netminder. Well, okay, so here's another transition because if we talk about Switzerland, these transitions just happen, so we'll just go with them, right?
Do it.
Um, but please do write, maybe write your all-star teams or at least post it on your social media. I'd be really curious to see that. But
Yeah.
we are just seamlessly transitioning to the Swiss team where, again, it's the goalie that keeps them in the games. But I think in this case, the much dramatic difference between, how much the goalie can do for a squad that basically can't match up with the others. Would you say that?
Yeah. I think it was honestly a little bit distressing to watch, not unexpected, but Switzerland had kind of been on an upward trajectory for a number of years, and it seems that that has kind of fallen apart a little bit. The goaltender that you're speaking about, of course, is Andrea Brandley, who currently plays in the Swedish league in Modo. She has had a fantastic season. Lights out almost every night, incredible numbers. I think she had like a 95% save percentage in the last couple of months. Um, Patient, but also athletic when she needs to be, always square to the puck. There's not a whole lot of unpredictability to her game. And I think that's nice for Switzerland because I think they desperately need that right now. Um, they have a lot of younger players on the tournament, but they were not the youngest team there by far. Most of their players at this tournament play in the Swiss League. The Swiss League is interesting because there's very little parity. There are three, maybe two good teams in the Swiss League, and then there are the others. There are quite a lot of blowouts. So the statistics, if you read player statistics, don't always mean what they seem to mean because they might have scored 5 goals in a blowout win. So the Swiss remain kind of difficult to evaluate through their domestic league. Um, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
struggling
don't
to,
want to say that the
I
future
know.
is not bright, but the clouds are rolling in.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And of course, they were missing Alina Mueller, who they would have been missing anyway, but she's also injured, and Laura Stalder. And I think in the was it the World Championships where I mean, those two basically just carried the team, put them on their back, and that's fine, but that's not a recipe for success. And then when they're missing, it certainly shows that nobody is really there to pick up the slack. So they're
Correct.
They
I
might
mean,
be.
with the way the World Championship structure is now, a team like Switzerland, they need to win the right games. So if they win basically one game to keep themselves up in the top league, is that a success if they lose all of the other games badly? I'm not sure. Can Stalder and Mueller and Bradley win that one game that they really need to win? Yeah, they can. Um, Two really dominant offensive players and a good goalie, you have a chance.
Yeah.
That the structure is now, there are two groups. There's Group A and Group B in the top division. So even if you lose Group A, you don't get relegated out of the World Championship. You just get moved into the second tier of the top tier.
Yeah, and they play their own round robin. You're right. I had forgotten that they changed that recently. Yeah, so they kind of play an A round robin and a B round robin, and then the crossover games, etc. So maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah. You're not the only one that's confused because the structure has changed a few times. The IHF is trying to find a way to create more parity, essentially, and I don't think that they've quite landed on it yet. But it gives a team like Switzerland sort of the opportunity to live another day if they have a bad year.
Right.
The problem with Switzerland is that I don't see help on the horizon, really. So even if they survive this year, what's going to happen next year? Not sure. Even goaltending wise, they have, like we said, Brandley, and they have Saskia Maurer, who is also a good goalie in her own right. I believe she's playing in the Swiss League right now. But after that, I'm not sure what they have sort of in the pipeline. I don't see the landscape in international hockey changing that much. I think that Sweden is a team that is on the rise after having sort of dropped out of the very top tier of international hockey. I think that they're going to be make an appearance back there and probably replace Switzerland in that top four, top five players, top five teams. Other than that, I mean, the Netherlands have done great things in the last few years, have moved up two divisions, which is incredible. But are they ready to compete with Finland and Sweden? No. Um, Norway's doing good things, has finally qualified for the top division of the World Championship, have a chance now to qualify for the Olympics, need to go through Sweden to do that. Are they ready? On a good day, maybe. We'll see. But I don't see the landscape changing that much. I think it'll be more the regular sort of 10 teams switching places a little bit, but nothing drastic in the coming years. I think what would be interesting on the international landscape is as the top countries start producing more players, if we start to see some international competition between the U18 World Championships and the Senior World Championships. So will we ever have a women's World Juniors U20 or U22? Canada and the US obviously are ready for that right now. I think Finland could field a team, Sweden could field a team. Beyond that, I'm not sure that there would be much competition. But it's an interesting place to go in the future, I think.
Yeah, I've heard that talked about as, yeah, kind of a nice option for kind of seeing where that group of players are on their own without, the older players taking the bigger roles and without just thrusting them into like a tournament like this where, some players are way ahead, but to see that even playing field, so to speak. But
Yeah,
you're
and I
right.
think just providing an opportunity for the smaller countries to develop more players longer. So a Germany, a Switzerland, you might have a lot of good players on your U18 team, but there isn't place for everyone on the senior team immediately. So if
Mhm.
I'm a U18 player that has suddenly graduated from U18, I don't make the senior national team. Do I continue competing at the highest level if I think that I don't cut it on the national team, despite the fact that the problem is really that I'm just too young, not ready? So I think a U22 competition of some sort, if not a world championship, then maybe just a regular Six Nations, would be a great opportunity to sort of level the playing field for those mid-tier countries.
Yeah. Yeah. And, thank you. This is all just, great food for thought and hopefully, fans that are starting to dig into the landscape of women's hockey, as you know, if they've either just come to the PWHL or want to know more about players that are coming up in the draft, or don't forget the Olympics are coming up. So, you've got to have eyes on players playing in various leagues around the world that are going to, hit the ice in 2026. And it's just it just makes for an interesting, I guess you could go down a rabbit hole on YouTube or on the internet, just sort of getting to know some of these names. And like for me, there's just interest in speculating, as you said, someone like Michelle Karvinen, or I would dream to see Jenny Hirakoski
Yes.
with,
Yes.
just I don't think it's going to happen, but these are like
I
things
know,
that
but I want to start that. We should start the campaign because I would love to see Hierikowski and Karvinen even for one season.
I know it's just like it's like a fantasy league, or just I guess in the video game you can do that, but that's the only place you can do that. And I love Hirakoski, and just to see how she would do with all these players around. And on the international stage, you do get to see it, but that's the best of the best. So let's say we kind of mix it up a little, and she's on a stage where she's definitely the best player on the ice, and can really have her way. And I don't know, things like that sort of intrigue me, so I like to go down those rabbit holes.
To me, it's kind of like the question always of like how many goals would Wayne Gretzky have scored against
Right.
modern goalies, right?
Right.
It's that, and then you can argue about it, and it's fun to kind of nerd out about it. And
Mhm.
and I do the same. I nerd out about Jenny Hierikowski, who at a certain point this season had taken 30 or 40 more shots than the next D in line. Like she's just so good at getting the puck to the net and
Yeah.
so effortlessly. She's so like she's got a little mean
Oh
streak.
gosh.
I
Yeah.
would love to see her at the top end. I don't believe that she'll ever go over or declare, but wow, if she does, like we'd be really lucky to see it.
Yeah. Well, any closing thoughts, just either on the wrap up of this tournament, or the upcoming World Championships, or anything else on your radar that fans might want to put on their calendar?
Yeah, I think we just live in this great time when not only is there women's hockey available on YouTube and being broadcast places, but it's good women's hockey. The Swedish League, if you've never seen it, find their YouTube. I'm in discussion a little bit, trying to get them a little bit more active, posting things for a different fan base, for the North American fan base. There are a lot of former college players and former PWHL players that will be playing in Sweden in the second half of the season. So I think the league is going to be just electrifying. There's a lot of parity this year. The league is very close. All of the games are good. So if you get a chance to tune in, tune in. If there's anything you're wondering about, you can contact me anytime. Again, I'm a bit of a nerd with this stuff. So if anyone wants to have a nerd discussion about women's hockey in Sweden or Europe in general, let me know. But it's been really a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Yeah. And I appreciate you saying that, because I'll be one of the people that reaches out to you. Laura, I'll definitely put your social media information, and get ready. Hopefully some fans will bombard you with questions. But keep up the good work for the hockey news, and I'll link to that as well. Maybe we'll see Laura's all tournament team, or something like that, now that I've pressured her into it.
Now I got to do it, eh?
Yeah, or I mean, maybe I'll post mine, and you can strongly disagree or correct me, because I don't have as much insight. But
I feel like we're on the same page with a lot of these things, so
yeah.
let's see.
But thank you so much. I know it's nighttime. We're very different time zones, so I appreciate you taking the time today, Laura. And again, folks, look her up, and I hope you'll follow and read everything she's posting, because it truly is one of a kind information that we're getting from Europe via Laura's great work. So thanks for joining us, Laura.
Thanks a lot for having me, C.
Okay.
Have a good one.
All right, you too.